Welcome to the show today, and welcome to the first in a series of episodes that I'm recording during time off in January 2025. I'm currently on leave, but in the interest of kind of just keeping the conversation going, keeping my mind going as well, after spending some time up in northern New Zealand, reading some old books on the shelf kind of gets you thinking. And so because I left my laptop behind, kind of on purpose, I guess, to spend more time with the family these holidays, it's kind of been building up in my head. So there's this idea that I have that I want to talk through today around balance. And as it relates to your investment portfolio, how you're building wealth, balance, really, really important. So I hope you enjoy this short one today.
You're listening in to the Everyday Investor Podcast, and I'm Darcy Ungaro. Business, shares, crypto, property, precious metals, and managed funds. It's not about the tools, though. It's about the dream and how much risk you're willing to take along the way. I'm aiming for a healthy margin above an average result for myself, my family, and the people I work with. If you're an everyday person, then please join me. The Everyday Investor Podcast thanks past, present, and future partners of the show. Special mention to Ungaro & Co. for financial advice, Gorilla Technologies for strategic IT solutions, and Icehouse Ventures for investment into Kiwi tech startups. Check out the show notes, subscribe to the fortnightly newsletter, say hello on the socials, and leave a 5-star review. But most importantly, remember, this isn't advice. If you need that, reach out to me or contact your current financial advisor for input. Thanks for joining me on this one. Let's make a start.
All right, so I am recording this one in early January after returning from a wee little trip up to northern New Zealand with the family. Now, I had every intention of doing a bit of work up there and doing a little bit of the podcast stuff and some writing. But out of all the things that I needed for that activity, the laptop was probably the most important one, which I left behind. But I am grateful, though, because I was genuinely able to tune out the work stuff and the thinking stuff for a good solid couple of weeks. No regrets. In fact, with the wife and kids, they're probably some of the most important time, and I don't just pay lip service to that. I think that's kind of the ideal, is that you'd like to be able to spend a good amount of time with friends, with your important significant other, and with your offspring. But sometimes that's really hard during certain key phases of your life, like when you're starting out or when you're building up a business or when you're trying to really make a big sprint in your career. It's kind of easy to let go of those things on the side that are equally important, but not always front of mind. So I really enjoyed it, spending time with each one of our kids. They're all really, really different, and clearly they need two parents, definitely at the moment. And I'm really grateful that I could provide at least 50% of that, knowing that I'm jointly and severally liable to my children's future. I have to kind of make sure that I'm giving them everything, not just building up my own financial well-being so I can pass it on to them, but I want to make sure that them as the vessel of what I want to give them is also ready. So that probably requires a lot more intense training, in my view, than what I feel like I can give them all the time. But I think it's so much more important to prepare that container than it is to build the stuff to give to them, that I'm keen to kind of always keep those two things in balance, what I'm building and who I'm building it for. So today I have no guest discussion to share with you. I just wanted to talk about something that kept coming up as a bit of a theme in my mind around this topic of balance. For me personally, as it relates to investing, I've concentrated at the start, and now I'm diversifying. I took something as one focused investment, and now I'm more about making sure I have distinct buckets of wealth in very different areas. When you're single, pre-children, post-children, retired, whatever, you have seasons of concentration and diversification with what we do with our wealth, but also with what we do with our time. I once worked with a client, though, on the investment side who invested fairly heavily into Apple shares when the price was around $30 to $35 per share. Now, I'm not sure if he's still in it to the extent that he was in the past, but at $243 a share today, at the time of recording, his concentrated investment really paid off. You focus your efforts to start with and then diversify to protect that later on. Now, when you're trading hours for time, when you're working, it's sometimes more appropriate to concentrate your money when you're investing, right? You can take more risk when you know that what is actually going to be paying the bills is most likely just going to be your ability to show up to work the next day. But at retirement, to manage the risk of losing what you've already built up, diversification makes a lot of sense. It's like that horrible jack-in-the-box game that you play as a kid. As long as you keep that wheel turning, you hear the music, but every now and then this really scary, evil clown-like figure jumps out of a box, and no wonder why you have nightmares to this day about it. Maybe that's just me. But sometimes it's more luck than skill when you concentrate. And that's the thing that we have to just be mindful of. You might be really, really clever, or you might be lucky and clever too. Diversification, therefore, is the main message preached when you seek financial advice. That's what I would feel safe to offer you as default advice, because I know from a regulatory point of view, it's really safe to preach diversification. And also just from acting in my client's best interest for most of the time, for most people, that probably is the answer as well. But for some people, it's not actually the best strategy for them. But it's very dangerous giving that advice because you're kind of helping somebody gamble the further and further you out the risk curve. So while there's still a chance of a massive gain for most people, most of the time, diversification is the best way to go. So hopefully I covered that evenly. It's a tough one to cover that topic, but balance, that's what I wanted to have a chat to you about today. It's dynamic in our relationships, in our portfolios, our mental health, our career. There's seasons when some things will be pushed aside to make room for the exploitation of some sort of opportunity. And there are seasons where things have to be allocated to evenly, both in your financial resources and in your own human time and energy resources. The difference between diversification and balance, though, just in case you're wondering, is there a difference between these two things? Is that with one, you should maintain it your entire life. That's balance. And the other one, diversification, you should employ during certain seasons of your life. In other words, failure to maintain diversification isn't as critical as maintaining balance. For example, I once had a client that paid a whole bunch of money for some high-intensity personal coaching with Tony Robbins, and it genuinely changed his life. He went from slightly overweight, not motivated, kind of just stuck at a certain ceiling in his career. He lost a bunch of weight. He ran his first marathon and he got promoted. So he basically achieved his goals when I first met him. But unfortunately, while two areas of his life really took off, his career and his health, he in the process neglected his relationship with his wife and with his kids as well. Eventually, he learned the importance of balance. Ambition is great, right? Like it's this awesome stuff that we as humans bring to the table. And when it's given some structure, we can actually see some pretty amazing progress being made in our lives. We can build businesses. We can make a lot of change happen in our sphere of influence. But I would just suggest maybe sometimes you need to count the cost. And in some cases, we might do well to balance our personal development, like how to make ourselves better, with the other items of value around us, specifically people. And you might be wondering, by the way, why this short sermon here on this topic of balance? Well, I've said this before, I'm sure, but I believe that over the next 5 years, there's going to be immense opportunity for both gain and for loss. It all just depends on which side you back. It's kind of a weird, sick sort of game that it seems like we're forced to play in life. Technological and societal changes can make everyday people like you and me, people like, I don't know about you, but for me, who've come from relatively nothing, to actually make us go further and faster. And I think a lot of people will be made extremely wealthy during this period of time. But equally, I think a lot of people, especially those that are just going through life relatively passively, they might end up being poor a lot faster in this new world. So maintaining balance going forward is going to be really, really hard for most of us. And I think that we're going to feel far more fear in the future as well as the pace of change heats up. Most of us, most of the time, freak out when things change. We just assume that it's bad. And I think that's part of that sort of primal thinking. But it's not always bad. Sometimes it's really good change and it just feels bad. So you have to kind of discern what the difference is there. But I love helping people, for example, set their investment portfolios up for the future. But a lot of this involves understanding how they will actually act in the future, not what they know is the right answer. It's really easy to probe somebody and quiz them around what they think the future would look like and what they think the right answer would look like as a result. And that's where the really big change actually happens. That's where I think this strategy lies. New markets to invest in could appear within months in the future, though. Technology is going to speed everything up. From humans and from non-humans will literally add a new dimension to how we live. Big ideas, but that's what I can see happening, and I think the way that you invest should tilt towards that. I'm just going to take a little tangent. During my summer, I ended up doing a lot more reading than normal, hitting those bookshelves in the place that we were staying that haven't been hit for a while. A lot of dust on these books. And somewhere along the line, I stumbled across a quote from an American biologist named Edward O. Wilson. And he was made famous. This is my understanding of him after I did a little bit of Googling. He was made famous for his contributions to the fields of evolutionary biology. Here's the quote that struck me. The real problem of humanity is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. Our default then, if you like, is to respond to future change. This is what we need to be aware of, with mechanisms previously useful for survival in a very different environment. We're off to a future with a mind from the past. What could possibly go wrong, right? So Edward Wilson seems to talk a little bit about forms of government, religious organizations, and even social norms in his work. So these institutions aren't really suited already for the challenges of today, let alone tomorrow. So if we have technology now that can alter the planet or even end human existence, just consider the fact that it's all driven by emotions and institutions created for past realities. Is there a possibility that technology pushes us into a place which is obviously in our best interests, or we just stumble across it by accident? Or is it more likely that we'll blow ourselves up in the process? And I guess it doesn't really matter the value of your portfolio then, does it? But this Edward Wilson person, he called for renewed interest in the three questions which appear to be an echo of the work of Immanuel Kant. Where do we come from? Like, did we really evolve from slime to monkeys to humans? Or were we created at some point in time? Who are we? What defines a human? And what's our place in the world? Where are we going? Is there a future for our kind, both as a species, like human species, and for us individually? Like, should we be hopeful for the future? Now, right about now, by the way, you might be wondering where I'm going with all this, and that is a fair question. So I'll get to the point. Sometimes the hardest part of growing wealth is just getting started, and that's nothing new. Hopefully you've heard that on 1,000 different podcasts. The hardest part is getting off the sidelines where you think you're in the game, but you're actually just watching the game and actually getting stuck into it. But when you know that you're at least on your way to financial security and it looks like it might be attainable at some point in the future, there are some questions like this that you need to consider, and it will help you get back to balance if you notice that one area of your life is growing out of control at the expense of others. So I think about this in the context of a New Year's resolution, for example. If you're leaving people or other things that are important to you behind in the process of doing whatever you're doing, what are you really doing? So that brings me to 2025 and what it looks like for you. To avoid falling through this very thin ground when you concentrate in one very narrow part of your life, it's about getting back to balance as fast as you can. So I don't know if this is actually striking with anybody else, but this is kind of just one of the things that I've been thinking about over the last couple of weeks, when I've allowed myself not to be thinking too much about work and things that I have to do, this seems to be the message that keeps on coming through for 2025: balance. It's not about building wealth in just one area. It's about building wealth in a lot of your areas. Sometimes you might need to make changes if that needs to occur, and other times you just need to make sure that you're following the original strategy that you put in place years and years ago. Awesome. That's it for this one today. I hope that was valuable to at least some of you out there, and we'll catch you next week.
Thanks for joining me today on the Everyday Investor Podcast. Hope you enjoyed that, and if you did, please share me around. For the odd giveaway, invite, and sneak peek, make sure that you've subscribed to the fortnightly newsletter. The link is in the show notes, as well as special referral codes from previous guests on the show. Remember, our show partners Ungaro & Co., Gorilla Technologies, and Icehouse Ventures. Lastly, a final reminder. Please remember this isn't financial advice. If you need that, reach out to me or your current financial advisor. Thanks again for joining me on this one, and we'll catch you next week.
Diversify, the real mission. Beyond risk, beyond the chase. Hide and seek, sleeping ace. Breakdown. Balance cracks with walls every phase. Love, health, wealth in different ways. A cautionary tale of the lone achiever. Celebrate with none, success a deceiver.